Yeah, just for the. Yeah, I'm bringing it. I'm bringing it. No, that'll be this.
Where am I going? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do I need to use the clipper or do I do the intro?
Get the heat. All right, number 8. And number 8 is from Damascus High School.
Oh.
And Damascus is a big supporter of us. They always turn in applications. So that'll do it. What I do is not directly speak with the student. I go through the counselors. I will ask them to make sure the student receives a disclaimer where they agree that we can put their likeness and name and school name onto our website so that everyone can see who it is that's receiving your money. So thank you.
The question for our virtual audience was, will we consider offering this to college students? I don't think we've thought about it yet, but there is less and less interest in high schools in terms of guidance counselor outreach. So there may be a higher demand for like an undergrad student. So that's something that we can consider.
And these actually are college to be students because the application requires that you submit it if you are on your way to school in the fall.
Great. So, yep, thanks for that recommendation. And election notes. So Mr. Geis's passing came as a surprise and a tragic shock. So we weren't 100% in line with PMI Global, but we had some back and forth on the election, and the Region 5 election coordinator is going to schedule the e-ballot release next Friday, the 10th. So that'll be sent to all our valid members as of the day prior, which is 1,750 strong. The good news is that we received singular nominations for each available position. So for chapter president, I'll ask for you to put your faith in me for a year. And with the pledge that Mr. Geis looked at this chapter as being all about the members, maximum value for the members, not for the board members. This is a nonprofit organization. For those who looked at our newsletter or projectmanagement.com and saw a friend of our chapter, Lee Lampert, interviewed the PMI CEO and put him on the spot and said, to me and to others, PMI is becoming a more of a for-profit business versus nonprofit. Fees are going up, certification renewals are going up, certifications themselves are going up. The PMI CEO essentially said the world's costs are going up, so in step they have to. But if you compare, and a few months ago I even had a slide of what our streaming services are going up percentage-wise compared to the $10 that PMI took you up for your annual membership. So it's inevitable to some extent, but we want to ensure that the free training and with the pandemic, we lost a little bit of traction on symposiums and getting space. Our co-VP of program-elect, Casa, is here. And one of his, even before he put his name in the hat to return to the board after a 4-year absence, maybe. He had a whole map for the symposium for the fall and a 2-day event, and we can explore sponsors to potentially help out with that cost, but that will be continued free as to all valid members. And then our November dinner, where we fill this room up, it will continue to be free, as well as our member appreciation of that. Mr. Bill Ziegler is over there. He's been a past board member with PMI Baltimore and really helped stand up their Frederick remote site division, which is still flourishing. So we're looking forward to having him and all the great ideas he has. And then Miss Roxanne Angel, who's recently retired from the federal government, would be joining us as well. So the formal vote still has to go out to adhere by the bylaws, but if anybody abstains, don't hurt my feelings, but you don't have to necessarily raise a hand. So, but that will be coming out, and we look forward to having a full board together to continue to add value to memberships. And before the pandemic, we were around 2175 members. So with all professional associations, they're starting to take a little bit of a downward trajectory, but we hope we can inject that back up and get back over 2,000 members. Next. Okay, if you're finding yourself AI curious, and pretty much at this point in modern times, everybody is at least either curious or fearful, but PMI last year offered artificial intelligence for project managers foundations course. They build upon that with a data landscape course, which is available for free as long as you have your valid membership. Log into PMI Global and you can take that class. It doesn't give you a certification or credential or micro credential, but it continues to showcase what AI can do. For those who were at my September briefing last year, we had some examples of using generative AI to map out your critical path, things of that nature. Our speaker last month, Mr. Weaver, really focused on what schedule management is in the 21st century and in the 2020s. And I think that builds upon it well. So with everything generative AI, you need a data foundation. So this class is good. 5 PDUs are on the table. It doesn't take 5 hours. It will probably take 2 hours. So stay tuned to the newsletter for that. Next. Okay, and then also within the past few years, PMI's launched a construction professional certification. As a board member, that's the one genre of project managers we haven't really attracted, even though every time you're on 270 or on GW Parkway, there's a lot of construction project managers because there's a lot of construction. But getting them into the PMI meeting places and networking, because we didn't, a lot of the PMPs more on IT project management, healthcare project management, not construction. Construction is different. So within the past 2 years, they've launched that certification. And within the first 16 months, as of late last year, there were only 26 PMI CPs in the United States. And for every billion spent on construction projects, 127 million is considered waste, or what we consider tech debt and project debt. So there's a lot of improvements that can be made with construction projects. You're exposed to outdoor elements, but PMI Global is really focusing on that. And in two Tuesdays from yesterday, they'll be offering a training opportunity to look at the project outcomes for construction, and the product owner who actually developed the PMI CP test will be given the class. So if you're a construction project manager yourself, if you're looking to pivot, if you know someone, this is a good training opportunity for the low price of $1. Next slide. Okay, does anyone need a job who's in the room? Okay, you want to speak to your dream job? Okay, so an account management, project management, mid-level to senior position. Does anyone have a job who's in the room or can put it in chat? Okay, well, we are working on a job board, so that'll be launching later this month. And I'll get with you afterwards. Yep. Okay, next slide. Okay, for those who need PDUs, our March presentation had a Gartner VP, and Gartner would let us record it to put it on YouTube. And last month, we had some resource challenges, but 95% of our presentations are on our YouTube channel, including this one, with the PDU claim code. So if you're looking for background noise when you're remote working, which we'll talk about in a little bit in the presentation, this is a good opportunity to knock out 7 to 10 PDUs in a workday. We're one of the few chapters that have a sister Toastmasters group associated with our chapter. And for more about that, we'll bring their leadership team up to the stage. Round of applause.
Thanks, Matt. So good evening, everyone. I'm here as the VPPR, or the Vice President of Public Affairs for the PMI Toastmasters group. And just to make an announcement that our meetings are held every second and fourth Wednesday of the month on Zoom, and then the third Wednesday in person at Walter Johnson High School currently, at least through June. And then we'll be updating the information for the rest of the calendar year. And our next meeting is a week from today on Zoom. And if you would like, please come see me. I can give you our website, and that has like our website information and our little business card if you're interested. And you do get PDUs. If you become a member and you attend the meetings, you can get 1.5 PDUs per meeting. And over the course of a year, you can get up to 54 PDUs, which is almost like all the PDUs we need for recertification.
And I think with a lot of us, the summer slows down a little bit from work obligations and routines. So using this summer break, not from work, but from some family obligations or things that come with summer vacation, would be a good time to pop back into Toastmasters. The virtual offerings 2 times a month make it more flexible. Encourage it for everyone. We can all be better public speakers, as you'll find out here in a minute. Okay, new book alert, or a book to be. Miss Laura Bernard, who's one of the founders of Project Management for Change and has ran the Project Management Day of Service across the world, but what was founded in the National Capital Region 10 years ago. She's a former chapter board member, and she always wanted to write a book. For those who have written a book, you understand how taxing it is. For those who haven't written a book yet, there's probably some reason why you haven't, from a time commitment or what's taking you so long. So we're very proud and impressed of her that she's finally taken her PMO strategies and PMO impact brands and drafted her first nonfiction professional development, soon to be bestseller. So that'll be in bookstores, to include Amazon, in early September for $30. If you pre-order from her website, you can still go through Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You just have to show a proof of receipt. You'll get the digital access to the book, and we'll be raffling off hard copies at our October meeting as well, and potentially bring her in for in-person talk, or at least a virtual luncheon offering. So more to come there, but congratulations to Ms. Bernard. Our sister chapters are doing great things. PMI WDC has a luncheon next Thursday in Reston with a virtual option on scalable project management solutions for digital agencies. So that's if you're looking to get out of the office and you're near Northern Virginia, or it's worth a road trip, that's a good use of your time. It's free. It's a bring your own lunch. And then they're having their symposium August 23rd and 24th, which is a Wednesday, Thursday. And across the 2 days, 10 plus PDUs can be gained. They just closed their call for presentations. So they'll have announcements over the next few months on who their presenters are and who their keynotes are, and we'll continue to promote their offerings. PMI Baltimore has a busy Wednesday in 2 weeks. Their Columbia division is presenting on the influence that project managers can have. And then their Frederick division, right up 270 at Mount St. Mary's, it has a project negotiation and influencing outcome. So, and from what I hear, that registration's getting less than 30 people. So if you live close enough to Frederick that's worth your while, that's the great presentation to go to as well. Next Wednesday, our sister chapter of PMI Silver Spring, who's also celebrating a 20-year anniversary, is hosting a virtual meeting on building better sponsorship allies and stakeholders from friend of the chapter, Mr. Carl Pritchard, who spoke at our November dinner, and also has a new book out that parallels his fight with stage 4 cancer with project management frameworks, which is a great book. And we've raffled off a couple copies and will next month as well. And they're having their symposium the day before PMI WDC, so they got there first. But that's a busy week for project managers in the National Capital Region. So that'll be the 22nd, and their theme is transformative leadership in the age of AI. 6+ PDUs can be gained between keynotes and breakouts, and we'll continue to publicize and promote that. And then the National Institute of Cancer has had a few project management night outs at Hood College in Frederick, and they had one last week. Did anyone go? No. Okay. But that's also a good non-PMI affiliation, but continuing to get all the great things that can come with project management out in the ether. Our education partners are doing great things, from Mr. Pritchard to Lisa and David, who moved up to Delaware. They were just presenting to PMI Baltimore Frederick a few weeks back. We're continuing our partnership with Montgomery College and are looking forward to having an education day this summer once the campus is cleared at Globe Hall, as we've done in the past. So stay tuned for that. And we'll continue to promote on our website calendar all the other educational offerings for those who have an annual education and training allowance. This is a good use of that. And I didn't want this meeting to be all about me, so I'm like, you have to vote for me for president, and now I'm introducing myself. So we'll keep this part short, quick. I've had the pleasure of being a board officer since 2016 here, and looking forward to continue that. I'm not a very good golfer, but I try, and have had some great opportunities within Department of Defense IT and the federal government over 20 years as both a private sector contractor and a government employee for the last 5.5 years. So we'll let our lovely volunteer, Ms. Rodden, get back to her seat. After one, breathe. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the future of project work to infinity and beyond. Play on words and a tribute to our friends Buzz and Woody from Toy Story, but I think that there's we don't really know what the world holds, and in terms of artificial intelligence and all the movements we've made over the past 3 or 4 years in generative AI, we continue to, I think, even surprise ourselves. So. Okay, so earlier this spring, PMI Global, and if you wonder where your increased fees go to, it's going to research. So that's a good thing. For a Gartner license or other big research firms, companies are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for their whole company. For PMI, we pay our annual dues and we get all this great research from these 2 reports. So. The pulse of the profession was more focused on how and where work is happening, and then the global PM trends look at PMI from a overall global powerhouse, and that's really what they've become. And if you seek out the PMI CEO, one of his probably legacy after this term is going to be how much global reach and enhancements he's had across the world for project management, which is good for us if we ever leave North America, but it's also better that the world didn't need project managers. In the 60s, PMI didn't exist. Civilizations were built, cities were built without a PMBOK or certified PMPs. So the fact that we're continuing to grow the value of project managers is good for us across the map in the globe. So that's where the global PM trend report comes in. The theme was moving past office-centric models, which makes it, initially you're like, oh, it's all about the power of remote work and teleworking, and you can work anywhere, which is true. But the data that they collected is actually a little contradictory to that in terms of what the survey responses were. And this was a report based on a global survey in project management. Some of you may have gotten an email last summer to participate. By a show of hands from the room, who likes to take surveys? Okay, we have a couple. I mean, every receipt you get anymore, it's like if you fill out the survey, you get a free X or Y. But I think surveys of this nature, which are actually make you think and are more thought-provoking and have value, that all of you are together to hear a summation of the thoughts, or you're sitting here right now and being like, I could have read the report myself and not been here, but hopefully you're happy you're here. So that was a little less than 2,500 project professionals, and 340 leaders identified themselves as project leaders, focused on really delivering how they're working, where they're working, what they're working on. And that's what generates these annual reports. So this summer, they'll start working on the 2025 reports. So if you do have the opportunity to participate, I'd recommend it. Okay, so we'll start with the where. So project professionals are slowly returning on site at a more consistent pace. You'll see in 2021, 89% were working remotely at least some of the time. And in 2023, that's gone down to 61%. So almost 30% are less are working remotely even 1 day a week, which means they're back in the office. By a show of hands from the room, is anyone back in the office 100% of the time? Okay, less than 5% of the room. And in chat, feel free to include yours. Some jobs you need to be there. We talk construction project management and PMI's investment in that. It's hard to be a construction project manager if you're not on site. So 63% of construction project managers are on site 100% of the time. So that's going to skew the statistics here. And a lot of what's in reports like this of this many people were surveyed is you have to look at the numbers overall and say, what's driving those up? And a few in chat are in the office 2 or 3 days a week. As a federal employee who works at what's still the biggest office building in the US of the Pentagon, there's not even enough, even a building that can house 25,000 employees doesn't have enough seats for everybody to be back 100% of the time. So because of the increase in demand for DoD resources, both government, military, and contractor, we can't even house them. And we have some GSA employees here, and there's plenty of federal buildings around the National Capital Region that aren't being used right now, but it's not as simple as, well, we'll send Air Force personnel to this building because it with codes and things of that nature, it doesn't work that way. Cassie, go ahead.
You said the construction and skewed, this is 100% on site. What percentage of construction versus
We'll get into that in the next slide. So the question, one of the questions was how much of the construction was a part of the overall responses. And then manufacturing, some manufacturing positions can be done remotely, but a lot of the line work that we still have in this country would be more on site. And the smallest actually is healthcare IT, which was surprising that that's 35%. Is anybody in the room a remote 100% of the time? Okay, so about 10 to 15% of the room. Okay, so the question that was asked was how many of the project managers that identify themselves as construction participate in the survey. We don't necessarily have a number for that. I can keep digging in the backup data and get you an answer, but 63% of construction was in person, 34% was hybrid, so 1 or 2 days on site, the rest remote, and then only 3% remote, just with the nature of construction projects. And if you look, the government, 36% in person, 48% hybrid, 16% remote. And I think that from March of 2020 to today, that's continuing to decline, at least in terms of DoD. Like they want to hire people who work in the capital region, even if there's more value gained with the remote workers' expertise. And then in IT, depending on the scope of the IT work, if you're working with a lot of network IT and you have to physically touch equipment in the server farm, even though data centers are not becoming obsolete, but there's more virtual data farms than not. But Amazon and Google are still acquiring a lot of real estate in Loudon County for data centers. So that shows you that physical data centers are still impactful. So I think that speaks a lot to the hybrid nature and the less remote. With energy, Mr. Steckel is a proud NRC team member. What would you describe your NRC structure for the nuclear regulatory?
Well, it's pretty widespread. 8 different offices, various regulatory needs, security purposes, medical, isotope regulation, as well as licensing. But it looks like advanced reactors, modules, advanced fuel are going to be the future of meeting the base load near term. Fusion, maybe another 30 years. Who knows?
Okay. So for our virtual attendees and those in the back, Mr. Steckel, a board member who works for Nuclear Regulatory Commission, spoke to that it's still hybrid-ish, you'd say? Yeah. Okay. And then in terms of where we rank with project managers around the world, North America's in-person work is 18% of the workforce, with 53% being hybrid and 29% being remote. If you compare that with countries as large as us, China is 72% in person, 27% hybrid, and 1% remote. And Europe and South Asia, Europe's much around our same in person, but more heavy on the hybrid and less remote workers. So I think hybrid's probably where the data shows we're going to stay across all industries. But it's going to be interesting on what we do with all this commercial real estate too, because a lot of hybrid offices, if employees are only using hotel desk space 1 or 2 days a week, we're seeing a lot of companies, at least in the capital region area, reduce they don't need these huge cube farms anymore for 60 to 100 employees to come in. Like they can get by with 20 to 25 seats and reduce their commercial real estate bill. And in DC and Northern Virginia, and even up and down 270s, not cheap. So landlords are seeing less of their property use, so they're raising the rates, and that's going to have an interesting impact as well. Okay, so the chart we have here is the effectiveness of remote work compared to in-person work, and you'll see that senior leaders feel that in-person work is more effective than remote work, where the employees feel that it's more effective, which the employees are getting the convenience. A lot of senior leaders, managers, executives are still having to go in every day. In my world, in the Pentagon, a lot of the SESs and general officers are expected in. They're not necessarily expecting 100% of their staff to be in, but they're expected in. So I think that expectation of leadership is, if you're in that, top 5% of the organization, that you are in the office yourself, and then kind of wanted to take it to what's the value proposition or value perception of senior leaders of what's effective versus not effective. So Microsoft has coined productivity paranoia, which is leaders fear that remote work is leading to lost productivity due to employees not working. They don't see it. Granted, pre-pandemic, you'd walk by people's cube farms and they had CNN up, they had ESPN up, they're drafting their fantasy football team. So it's not like they were 100% in the zone because you were at your desk. But when you don't have that vision, and coffee breaks and smoke breaks, and those are being replaced with remote workers and hybrid workers doing laundry or getting some much needed sunlight during the day. It's the same breaks, but I think there's a negative stigma on because they don't see you and they're assuming the worst. The data shows that senior leaders are 8% less likely to state that remote work is more effective than in-person work. And then a McKinsey study found only 41% of leaders are comfortable leading remote teams. So that goes back to the productivity paranoia. It's more of an insecurity of leadership. And am I an effective leader if I'm not leading by example in person. Like they can be in the office, but are you leading by example if your staff's mostly remote and hybrid and don't see you leading by example? How much verbal leadership do we have right now as opposed to leading by example or follow what I'm doing, but not what I'm saying? Any thoughts there?
Obviously, you can't walk around.
Yep.
Meanwhile, are we supposed to follow every hour? Obviously,
Yeah.
I'll just say probably jealous over these boat jobs. Productions I like that was 21, 22. Much better shape. And I think that's fine. Productive take, they're doing all sorts of. I'll just say them. Good or bad.
Yep. And for those virtual, just I think it's a leadership challenge to lead remote and hybrid because you don't know, but you have to put your faith in. Yep. Yeah, and it also cited that our current workforce multitask more than probably other generations did with the virtual tools and virtual collaboration, and you can do more. Like I was in a meeting last week with my direct supervisor, and somebody posted something in Teams, and I responded, and he was on the same Teams channel, so he was like, "What was that?" And then like it became apparent to me that 100% of my attention should have been on the conversation. So I apologize. I see where you're going. That won't happen again. And that was because my personality is multitasking, and if you're only 100% locked in, like then all the work that isn't going to get done just continues to pile up. I think in terms of at least my peers, I'm better than average as a multitasker, but the old adage, if you're doing 2 or 3 things at once, you're not doing any of them well. Like I get that, but then that goes back to priority management, which you can't manage time. So a lot of people say time management, but it's more, what are you prioritizing and what's important? Brad, go ahead. So the response was more, there's productivity has intangibles to it. It doesn't necessarily have to equal metrics that matter, but it can be the intangibles. And we'll talk about enablers later on in the presentation in terms of the mentoring and the coaching and the value of and there's a lot of value in being in person because you are hearing the water cooler conversations. You are getting the drive-bys by leadership. And if you're working remotely, you're just basically restricted to the Slack or the Teams chat or whatever meetings you're having, but you're not seeing that in-office intangibles that can come. Okay, so in terms of the insecurities of leaders, more than 40% don't feel that they're equipped to lead remote teams. I just wanted to pull that string a little bit with some success keys. So setting team communication expectations early. The whole, this is red hot or high importance in Outlook, but how long have they been? Then you scroll down the email and the person asked them for that like a week ago. So how hot could it have been? It's so being on top of the scope and then setting that team expectation of, hey, this is coming, we need this, and as early as you can, so that it's easier to track. Because if you're waiting until the 11th hour to even let your team know something, that's when you see them as away on Slack or Teams, and you're like, I need you right now. And if you were in the office, I could just be like, I need this, but that's not realistic, and I don't think it's realistic to expect of our employees. Find ways to build team bonds. The more cohesive, and like, there's a lot of people who don't think work families are families, so we won't use that word, but the more cohesive of a team and stakeholder community you can be, I think the more that it's easier to, the morale's up, the communication's up. You don't have the one or two employees that you, or 5 or 10% that you don't hear from for the whole week outside of like maybe one meeting. So the team can do a lot of the servant leadership, not for you, but in complement of what you're doing. Active listening, going back to my example of multitasking during a call that was more important than I gave it the credit and respect for. If your employees and your staff feel that you're actually listening to them and you're not doing 2 or 3 things at once, I think that goes a long way in terms of understanding each other. And then checking your own progress, quality check, self-assessments. Are you doing everything you can to be a good leader to all your employees? Is there not an intentional bias, but are you a better leader, servant leader to your on-site staff and on-prem staff than you are your remote workers or your hybrid workers that you may only see once a week? Like, not everything's equal, but in terms of leading remote teams, I think the closer you can get to an even playing field helps with that. So how do you start? Trust and transparency. If you don't have that, it's hard to really forge a bond with your team and putting out there what you expect and then holding yourself to what you're expecting of others. I think that's kind of taken a step back in these 4 years of the pandemic and post-pandemic. And then running a people-centric organization that's focused on development and growth. You should always be looking to have your successor and groom those to reach success that you never did. Like, for those of us who are parents, the majority of us want our children to be leaps and bounds more successful than we ever were. And that's why we invest in their education growing up, things of that nature. So we should lead work teams with the same focus that many look at their parenting and families of grooming leaders and not being insecure about holding on to your spot or that type of thing, or jealous that they're a remote worker and you have to be in, because a lot of it's scope specific for those who have the secret clearance or classified jobs. Yeah, like, you can't take your classified computer home with you. So it makes sense that you're there. So usually there's rationale for why people are in the office. Any thoughts there? Anything that is on the slide that you hold yourselves to or think is worth something? Ms. Fuller? Okay. Comment was be on camera 100% for meetings because it's going to be harder to multitask or look distracted or just up and up leave the meeting and change out your laundry or things of that nature. So, yep. I think some aren't on camera because they're being more lax with the dress code. What's your take on that? Do you care what they wear? Okay, great. Yeah.
Stand up.
So if you're not wearing trousers, stay seated and have a tighter zoom on your tie or necklace up. Is there any counterpoints of like, why should I have to be on video if I'm remote or virtual, either on chat or in the room? Mr. Baldwin? Okay. So one of the points was that it does affect the latency of the network, which is true at least with DoD teams, and on chat we got bandwidth there as well. I think when, in my experience, I have a few people who are always on camera and then nobody else is, and the way that it's set up, like you have the slides and then you have that person, even though they're not a key attendee of the meeting. So that would be one counterpoint of it can be distracting if you don't have a policy for 100%, because then the one person on the camera, and it's like, well, why are you on? You're not talking. So I think maybe a compromise is if you're talking, you have to be on camera, but I see the point of reducing the multitasking. So. Yes, ma'am.
Having a camera on, it just helps them if you have new people joining your team who don't know anybody. They were hired under the open door. So I always feel that I had a strong team beforehand. So I hired a bunch of new people. They have no clue who these other folks are. I know everybody that I've worked with them when we're in the office. So I think having the cameras on really helps the newer folks get acclimated and feel like they're part of a team. But they're already, like some people out in Arizona and Texas, and most of us here in the DC area, so I always feel that, distance, but not having the camera on increases that doesn't give them that chance to really know who that person is, who that name exactly, so just saying that name, and sometimes a emoticon out there. I think having the camera on that. And I do enforce for one meeting, we have 2 meetings a month. You will not only have on your camera, but you also have on your company shirt.
Great, that's a great policy. Yeah. So for those virtual, it increases the morale in the sense of team belonging, and it helps connect. And not an Air Force bias, but General Welsh is coined for saying that you can't lead someone if you don't know their story. So if you have a huge team, if you have like a big sprint development team and a software factory, are you going to be able to know every person? Probably not. But I think a lot of the organizational structures lend themselves to, less than 10 or 15 direct reports. So really understanding where they're coming from and what hardships they may have, and valuing what their story is, getting to know them as a person can help strengthen the remote work, hybrid work bonds. If somebody has to leave a hybrid situation in person every day at a certain time, if you understand what the hardship is, you can work around it, make sure it's still even playing field. So I just challenge everyone to try to, in leadership positions, understand where your employees are coming from and know their story. Okay, so now we'll get into the how with the 15 minutes we have left on the clock. So discipline agile, which PMI's really doubled down on in the past 7 years. They have 3 or 4 certifications and a handful of micro credentials, all focused on predictive, which is what we used to know as waterfall, hybrid, and then just traditional agile. So out of their ways of working spectrum, you may see your work environments in this Venn diagram. I think everyone has either a predictive, a hybrid, or agile work environment today, but will that change in the next 3 years? I don't necessarily see a return in predictive, but I think traditional agile is going to more hybrid. But what's the flavor of hybrid that you're working within? And then there's a lot of using agile as a crutch of, oh, we're agile, we can't produce a IMS, or we can't give you that cost and schedule ROM estimate because we're agile and it could change. But I think you can still give the information and forecast appropriately if you want to, regardless of where you fall in this work environment. So the myth of being more productive working remote than in the office is still up for debate based on the research that was in this report. 73% feel that their project performance was successful in a remote environment. That goes up to 0.2 percentage points for a hybrid, and then to in-person work goes up less than 2%. So we're not really seeing, based on the data, and granted this is just a survey, but a well-done survey, that, like hybrid work is so much better for project success than being in person and having people stuck in on 270 or 495 or GW Parkway for 2 or 2.5 hours out of the workday. The data is not lending itself to that. This is a little bit of a surprise to me because I thought the report would, before I read it cover to cover, would lend itself to remote and hybrid work was lend itself to better project success than in person. Is anybody else surprised by that, by a show of hands? Okay, a couple head nods. So the limitation of a 45-page report like this is you don't get a lot of the why or the case studies behind it, but it's eye-opening. And then just as the work performance by location is fairly even, so is their discipline agile approach of whether they're doing predictive waterfall or they're doing hybrid or doing agile. We see that the percentages are pretty much within 2 or 3% of each other. So from a hybrid perspective, it's within 1.5% for everything. For remote workers, around the same. And then in person, we're seeing a slight edge for hybrid. That's the greatest variation of this chart. Just a show of hands from in the room, who's doing more predictive waterfall project management? So, okay, less than 10% hybrid. Okay, probably about half of the room, and then just straight agile. Okay, and about that gap. So interesting. And feel free to share in chat. Then going back to like, what is project success and what's peak project performance? So based on this, it's the mean percentage of organizations completed projects that met the business goals. But that's still subjective. But under this data metric, almost 74% of completed projects met their forecasted business goals. So out of 100 projects, only 25 didn't. But how much money was exhausted and lost based on that project not meeting the business goals? That's data that I would have enjoyed seeing. And former First Lady Michelle Obama coined a quote that has always stuck with me: is success isn't about how your life looks to others, it's about how it feels to you. So that goes back more to what's project successful. I mean, we can look at, were you on schedule and under budget? That's the biggest thing, but some projects can be successful with one not reaching that per circumstances. Like maybe it could have been a lot worse in terms of going over budget or past the schedule, or different factors or requirements change, which happens to us a lot. So at the end of the day, we're responsible to our leadership, but we also have to look in the mirror. Okay, Mr. Rosenthal brought up the intangibles that come with in-person work. So they get into enablers a little bit. So we'll just touch on a few of them. So coaching and mentoring to help project professionals achieve professional development. That 48% of the survey respondents said their organizations offer support in that regard. And then that results in 76% of achieving that project success when that enabler is present. We have one of the area's greatest executive and life coaches, Maggie Rodden, in the room. So, and last year she presented on really the value of coaching within our project management industry. Training on new ways of working was 47%, second highest. I think we've learned through the last 10 years that just because we've always done something one way, that doesn't mean that that's the best way. And I think that's expanding a little bit. And you see that 76% felt they were successful with that. Communities of practice are continuing to help with that, even though I think we're seeing less of traditional PMO offices now, or at least in the federal government and DoD contract support. It's not as PMO heavy and centric as it was 10 to 15 years ago. Who still works either for a PMO or with the PMO, by a show of hands? Yep, so less than probably 15% of the room. So I think that's says something as well. And then down at the bottom, in terms of organizations that offer support, which is a little disconcerting, support for managing change via mental health resources. The pandemic took a hit to all of our psyches, and some recover quicker than not. So it's hopefully we'll see that number go up in terms of organizations offering those resources and support for both mental health and change management, as we'll see at the second to last. And then in terms of going back to the industries, ITs with enablers present is a high average, 76%. If they have the enablers present, feel that they're successful. And then with the government and down to construction, but all the industries are right around the same 70 percentile, give or take, which is sticks with that 3/4 that we saw in prior slides. Okay, so what's your point? So I think that we need to continue to support remote teams and recognize that not our talented workforce is going to work better in environments that suit them. So having a strict, 100% have to do this isn't in our best interest if we want our projects, programs, and portfolios to be successful. And then as we saw, there's not really data that supports that one way is the best way. So I think it's a combination of management approach is in looking at things on a more circumstantial basis of the talents that you have, and that'll lead to retention as well. Okay, so we'll touch on the what a little bit of what the work, as the hot topic of the industry continues to be AI. But what I have circled down below is 13% of employees have been offered AI training. And I think that's the biggest thing. And why that is because the AI training really doesn't exist that much. Even the PMI classes, which are good courses, don't put you in a place of expertise or knowledge that you can take that to your job the next day and have it successful. The organization has to commit to the AI first. And it's not so much how organized or disciplined the employee is. So I think we're not really in that master stage of offerings yet. 33% of, and this is from the jobs report, not the Postal Profession report, use AI in their jobs right now. We use AI within the chapter to help boost up project and presentation abstracts and synopsises. Some speakers have a couple sentences. I put it into Chat GPT and I can get like 4 paragraphs, and it's great. It brings people into the room, but that's where I've seen, at least in terms of this kind of professional association, event management of AI being a value add. Show of hands in the room, who's using AI by the definition of it in their jobs right now? Okay, so 15% of the room. So there's still, we talk about it. We have access to some parts. We're continuing to see in the news that Amazon has their own AI, not Alexa, but more professional. Even though Alexa can help you with your job too. But Amazon, Google, Microsoft are all putting their AI services out to the public. PMIs undergoing a better commitment to AI than I could ever perceive, but there's still a lot to go in terms of skill development and how we can actually use it. So we're scared by it. We're, is this going to replace our jobs? But we haven't really gotten that level of understanding yet, because I don't think anybody has, from the government in terms of regulatory down. So we're continuing to learn together. Employee retention strategies. How are employees going to keep up? Employers keep up in terms of being innovative enough. Investing in employee learning and training on the job was 81%. Automation of processes was 80%. Don't put me in a position where we have to do these manual processes over and over again. It's not exciting, and it doesn't give result and passion in the workforce. So I think the more business process automation we can do across project and program management, the better. Continuing to give upward mobility to your existing staff. Don't just hire the new shiny resume that is in your job pool. If you're putting your jobs in LinkedIn or USA Staffing or some of the other jobs, promote upward mobility within your organization, and that'll lead to retention as well. And in terms of high priorities for organization, digital transformation is continuing to be the biggest. I think we're seeing less companies offer specialized software because these giant software as a service companies, the Salesforces and ServiceNows, can do that capability, and you can't really compete with it. This isn't 20 years ago, and you had, a coworker make an Access database with like a shiny front end or something in Java or Visual Studio or Visual Basic, and that was the program that you used. I think we're more adapting to the world's digital transformation. And we see that in digital transformation, that's ranking the highest in Europe. Organizational strategy, North America is still very reorg heavy. I know how we can fix it. We can do a reorg, either strategic or within the employees. And in my experience, reorgs don't necessarily work, but which is why that's probably 36%. But these are the interesting data nuggets that you'll get from looking over the reports. And these slides will be made available after the presentation as well. Okay, in terms of North America at a glance, they have every continent covered with multiple pages and multiple statistics. So for those who have a more global look on the world, a lot of good data is there. Sectors to watch in North America in terms of job growth is, of course, construction, IT, and energy, as Mr. Steckel pointed out. The average median salary for project professionals in the U.S. is 120K, but at least in the capital region, 120K can't necessarily give you the quality of life that you aim for. So I think that salary's gotten better, and the trend analysis and statistics show there's an upward curve, but is that going to plateau? Like, our project managers being looked at as more a dime a dozen, and are you valued for your expertise and experience and acumen as much as maybe you were in the past or should be? Who feels they're overpaid right now? Okay, so that's telling as well. And then in terms of emerging industries in the U.S., hybrid and electric vehicle manufacturing, even though Tesla still hasn't had a Cybertruck on the road, and I think all of them got recalled again, that's the future. And 3D printing and prototyping services, drone manufacturing. But a lot of our project management expertise is we can't necessarily just like apply to a Tesla or and get those jobs. So it'd be interesting as the industries emerge, what that means for us in the workforce. And then one big thing was 10% feel that improved resiliency within the organization. And can your organization adapt and overcome hardships? And it'll be interesting if that goes up as well. Okay, and then in closing, when is all this going to happen? And one quote I like from Director Neil LaBute is, "The future is now. It's time to grow up and be strong. Tomorrow may well be too late." So not that if you're not AI savvy right now, you're too late, but you at least have to be open and curious to where the workforce is going, where being a project manager is. Does being a PMP matter as much as it used to? Are these certifications that PMI continues to innovate with and grow, are we hiring based on certifications anymore? With higher education, what's the value of a college degree to the in relation to what it costs? And I think that's in some industries it's more important than others. IT for the longest time, it was more what you had in terms of industry certifications versus degrees, but that's plateauing a little bit too. So who still feels master's degree is a good indication of an employee's acumen and wisdom? By show of hands. Okay, maybe, yeah, maybe 15 or 20% of those who showed hands who has a master's. Okay. So we want what we invested in, what we put so much time in, what we put so much resources and money in to matter. But is it going to matter 10, 15 years from now as we continue? So in closing, a lot of good data is out there. Hopefully either I lended you to opening up the links that you have, or maybe staying far away from them. Yeah, it's I look at it as good that PMI from a global is doing these reports, showing these research, continuing to go out to the project management community with these surveys to really assess where we're headed. And I think that can help us as leaders and managers and employees and team members optimize our success. So, a minute or two left. Any questions or any seed plants for us to take home with? Sure.
For success.
Okay.
Success for our managers to recognize. And this is part of what you're saying, it's time to grow up as well. These are opportunities. Look at the problems. We're going to stay as problems. Look at those opportunities. Changes your homework